We're continuing. Here we go. We are continuing our discussion, reading Chaitanya Leela, and we're actually still celebrating Gaur Purnima, even though it's a few weeks ago. By celebrating Gaur Purnima by reading about Chaitanya Leela, so we feel fully satiated. So we don't just like read one day and it's over, but we're still in the mood of Gaur Leela. So we'll do kirtan and then we'll start class, and had some Facebook password issues because of all the devotees that help me around the world logging on, and Facebook says, "You're bogus, change your password." So this is the second time this week they've asked us to change the password. So it slowed me down a little bit. Hare Krishna. Gauranga Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. You can hear all the birds, right? Just for effects. Sound like we're in Vrindavan, right? Yes? Sri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. You hear the peacocks? We don't have peacocks here. That's why you don't hear them. But you can imagine hearing peacocks. Radha Madhava. We're going to Vrindavan. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Yashodhanandana Rajajana Ranjana Jasodhanandana Rajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Yamana Tira Vanachari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Vijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Jasoda Nandana Rajajana Ranjana Shodhanandana Rajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Nandana Vraja Janaranjana Shodhanandana Vraja Janaranjana Shodhanandana Vraja Janaranjana Jamunatira Pamachari Jamunatira Pamachari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Gaur Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvise Shushanyabadi Paschatyasatarine Vanshakapaturubhyascha Kripashindubhye Vacha Patithanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vashari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram Ram Ram. Okay, the same problem keeps happening. I create a new bookmark, tells me we're all set, and I come back the next day and it takes me back to where we were last week. So, I need your help. Where do we leave off? We were, I have to guess again. Reading about the impersonal feature. Well, we're just going to try, unless somebody can tell me. I'm going to look now and see if anyone can say, where do we leave off? Tell me the paragraph. What does it start with? Who knows? Who remembers? Start. The impersonal description of the Absolute. Okay, we're right there. So, as you remember, Lo Chaitanya is speaking with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, slapping him around in the face, so to speak. And here is a great opportunity for Srila Prabhupada to worship Krishna by exposing impersonalism, a Mayavad philosophy. The impersonal description of the absolute truth in the Vedas is given to nullify the mundane conception of the absolute whole. In other words, the Vedas look impersonal because it says things like tari jati, tanai jati. He doesn't walk. He walks. He doesn't walk. Tadure tanbantike. He's far, but he's near. He's inside. He's outside. Doesn't have material form. See, I told you, he's impersonal. No, he doesn't have material form. He has spiritual form. Just because he doesn't have material form does not mean he's impersonal. So that's what Prabhupada's referring to. They negate the material so that they can explain the spiritual, but when they negate the material, some people stop there. Say, see, no form. Personal features of the Lord are completely different from all kinds of mundane features. The living entities are all individual persons, and they are all parts and parcels of the Supreme Whole. If the parts and parcels are individual persons, the source of their emanation must not be impersonal. He is the Supreme Person amongst all the relative persons. So, you don't have to be very smart to understand if whatever we have God must have it also. Well, actually, maybe you do have to be smart because a lot of people don't understand that. God can't be a person. Why? Because if he were a person, he'd be in one place. If he were a person, he'd be limited. So therefore, he must be impersonal. Material logic, right? If God were a person like you, he would be limited by being a person. But because he's not a person like you, he's not limited being a person. And you cannot be greater than him. So whatever you have, he must also have, because it comes from him, and you're a person, therefore he must be a person. Otherwise, you're better than him. You have something he doesn't have. Simple logic. Okay. The Vedas inform us that from him, Brahman, everything emanates, and on him everything rests. And after annihilation, everything merges in him only. Therefore, he is the ultimate dative, causative, and accommodating cause of all causes. And these causes cannot be attributed to an impersonal object. Sometimes people say, the universe told me. Really? Really? The universe speaks? Oh, okay, so the universe has a mouth. What else? Just a mouth, nothing else. Well, he must have eyes because he has to see what's going on so he could tell you something, right? And he must have an artistic sense because everything he created is beautiful. So here's the paradox. People are describing him or her or it, or whatever they want to call it, as impersonal, and they're attributing personal qualities to it. Universe, the intelligence of nature, nature's arrangement, attributing personal qualities but calling it impersonal. Doesn't make sense. If it's unembodied intelligence just floating around, it's like humidity in the air. You get some intelligence. Intelligence is a personal quality. Intelligence is possessed by people, isn't it? Think about it. The Vedas inform us that he alone became many, and when he so desires, he glances over material nature. Before he glanced over material nature, there was no material cosmic creation. Therefore, his glance is not material. In other words, he existed before the material creation, and he created it. So he must not be part of that. Material mind or senses were unborn when the Lord glanced over material nature. Thus, evidence in the Vedas proves that beyond a doubt the Lord has transcendental eyes and a transcendental mind. They are not material. His impersonality, therefore, is a negation of his materiality, but not a denial of his transcendental personality. And so we're reading this and going, okay, that makes sense. What's the big deal? It's just like kindergarten spirituality, ABC. Anybody can understand it. What's the big hullabaloo about all this? Because everywhere in the world today, people are saying the opposite of this. He's material, he's impersonal, he's come from something else. Personality is limiting. If you name it a he or a she, you're limiting it by naming it. That's why Prabhupada talks about this so much, because impersonalism is, especially Mayavad impersonalism, is pervasive. Now, the problem with Mayavad impersonalism is it goes right to the very source of our identity as servants of Krishna and just kind of erases that. So God is there. So you might say, well, it's theistic philosophy. God is there. You're God, I'm God, everything is God. And one person said, well, to me, that's a kind of atheism. Everything is God and then nothing is God. If everyone's rich, nobody's rich. Then we're all just normal. So the normal person becomes God, and then God is everybody, and then there's no God greater, so it's kind of atheism, you could say. But my point is that it destroys the tendency of service. Because there's now no one to serve. If I'm God, and you're God, like who do we serve? There's no God to serve. So that's pretty dangerous. Since we came to the material world to serve, not to serve God, and now we have a philosophy that God exists, but he doesn't exist, so we don't have to serve him. That's dangerous. Brahman ultimately refers to the personality of Godhead. Impersonal Brahman realization is just the negative conception of the mundane creations. Paramatma is the localized aspect of Brahman within all kinds of material bodies. Ultimately, the supreme Brahman realization is the realization of the personality of Godhead. Lord Sri Krishna is that supreme personality of Godhead, according to all evidence of the revealed scriptures. He is the ultimate source of Vishnu Tattvas. And I told you that story on Monday about a devotee who met someone in like 1972 or something. And he was asking about some great yogi. And the devotee said, well, he only came to the first stage of realization. There are 3 stages. So, he's going to have to come back to get to that final stage of realization. I thought that was an interesting way of explaining it, but it's true. As Prabhupada's explaining here, 3 stages of realization. So if you only are on the first stage of realization, Brahman realization, you may merge into Brahman, but arura krachena param padam tata. You will have to come back and start working on it again. And ultimately, we want to come to personal Bhagavan realization. So it's nice, it's an interesting way. Say, yes, so-and-so is realized, but he still has a way to go because he only realized the first level. So that's a good way to explain Krishna consciousness. Well, how is it different? Well, we're on level 3, Bhagavan realization. Most people are on Brahman realization. Maybe Paramatma. Not really. Yeah, a few yogis in India. In the West, not so much. The Puranas are also supplementary. The Puranas are also supplementary to the Vedas. The Vedic mantras are too difficult for an ordinary man. Women, Shudras, and the so-called twice-born higher class are unable to penetrate into the sense of the Vedas. Okay, women, don't get upset here. You are also have been associated with Shudras. Don't get upset because everyone in Kali Yuga is a Shudra. So it's interesting that this classification is made. Women, Shudras, and so-called twice-born means you're born in a Brahmin family, but your parents aren't actually living like Brahmins. And so one would think, well, why does it have to be stated if everyone's Shudra? Or not even everyone's Shudra, although it says Kalo Shudra Shambhava, everyone in Kali Yuga is born Shudra, but many people are born even lower. Well, they're Shudra, but also outside of the Vedic culture, which sometimes referred to as mlechas or yavanas, and not even within the culture of Shudra. And of course, the word Shudra has been given a black name. It's misunderstood. It's a work classification. But we may say, but isn't it distant from Brahmins? Not necessarily. Ramananda Roy was Shudra by occupation, Vaishnava by culture. So I find it interesting that a lot of these classifications, okay, you're a woman, you're a Shudra, you're a this or that, they make sense within a social structure in which there were distinctions between these classes. Like if we say women are less, that means the men must have been like way more than they are now, because nowadays you don't see like huge difference between men and women, and some women have higher IQs and some women are more capable, and you see nowadays we're seeing more women joining our movement. So that's where we get confused. These things, but why are they singling out women or Shudras or this or that when we don't really see distinction? It's kind of like in Kali Yuga, everybody's just bad. So where there's a distinction meant there were actually Brahmins of like extremely high level. They chant a mantra. They could kill somebody. They could send a weapon. They could, well, that's the Kshatriyas. The Brahmins also, and they could do so many things with their mantras, rejuvenate an animal and so forth. Have you seen any Brahmins like that around lately? That would be dangerous. You could hire them and they chant one mantra and you just killed somebody and nobody knows how they died. Probably good there are no Brahmins in Kali Yuga. Prabhupada said maybe there's a few left. Have you seen any men in Kali Yuga that the women are less intelligent? It means if women are less intelligent, they're less intelligent than men. Okay, show me all these like intelligent men who are like disciplined, self-controlled, this and that. Where are they? So if we're going to juxtapose women and men, you have to juxtapose them against men who are actually men, which are, I don't know, they're not so common. So that's something to consider when we see all these classifications. At least that's my understanding, that if these classifications are there, there must have been like huge distinctions between these classes. Like they had specific natures, qualifications or disqualifications that distinguished them from one another. And so, I find this argument, it's a funny argument, because it seems like the argument that women are this or that is often within this context. But it's Kali Yuga. So, are we down on Shudras? Are we down on Vaishyas? Vaishyas are also. Striya, Shudra, and Vaishya. Even, Krishna says, even in the Gita, even the Vaishyas, the God-forsaken Vaishyas, the business Vaishyas are farmers and merchants. Oh my God, what hope! What hope is there for a farmer or merchant to have any brain to understand Brahman? Even they can understand. What to speak of Shudras, and oh my God, women alike, how could they understand anything? That's what it seems to be saying, right? Well, my conclusion was that Kshatriyas, as we know, were amazing, powerful beings, and Brahmins, like they were real Kshatriyas and Brahmins. Then, in comparison to them, and the process was not Harinam, the process was the more difficult processes of spirituality, which required huge qualification. So, it's saying only the Brahmins and Kshatriyas were qualified, nobody else was qualified, and the qualification was very high. So now to apply that in Kali Yuga, it seems like very strange. Yes, there are differences between men and women. Some people are brahminically inclined, some are not, some are laborers and like that. But in terms of character and qualification, we all know everyone is not of the greatest character. And a simple laborer may have greater character than a priest, as we see this. So Kali Yuga is quite a theatrical mess, basically. So making these huge distinctions, it's all I can say is, I don't want to say more, I'll just say it's interesting when you try to make those distinctions, because as we know, everything is so mixed up. We see people coming to Krishna consciousness, young men and women, 19, 20, 21, so dedicated, like they've been devotees their whole life. And then we see sometimes children born in the Krishna conscious movement and having doubts, and sometimes leaving it for material life. And that doesn't make any sense, does it? Just by strictly analyzing certain shastric statements, that makes no sense. But it's Kali Yuga, and Mahaprabhu's mercy is there, and things are topsy-turvy, and this and that. And so I think we just need to be careful in making too many strict distinctions in a topsy-turvy age. Distinctions need to be there, of course, obviously, but how we make them might require a more refined way of understanding how to make them based on realities that exist in the world, in front of us, what we see. I'm sure that raised a few questions. Let me go back. So, I have a question. I don't know how to pronounce your name, because I don't know in your country how to pronounce it. So it's either Maja or Ma. If you're If it's Spanish, then it would be Maya, right? Anyway, you have to tell me how to pronounce it. How to understand that Srila Prabhupada wished all devotees to become Brahmins when we are all below Shudra in Kali Yuga, and when Krishna told Arjuna that he is a Kshatriya and cannot go meditating in the forest? I hope this question is reasonable, yeah, and relevant. Well, it's a good thing you brought this up. This is so interesting in many ways, and I'm sure if this question were asked to 10 devotees, you would get a few nuances in this answer. There's two things about understanding Brahman. We say Brahman initiation. Second, it's not actually traditionally it was not Brahman initiation. It's called Pancharatrika initiation. And that initiation, Pancharatrika initiation, which we called second initiation, was traditionally given at initiation. And the Brahman initiation, called Upanayanam, was traditionally given to students of the Gurukul, because they had to be Brahmins to learn Shastra and engage in some rituals and so forth. So then they were given Gayatri mantra, what we call Maya. Maya means Shakti. So traditionally, it was boys from Brahmin families and Kshatriya families go to the Gurukul. I think sometimes Vaishyas, maybe, if they were lucky. Shudras were considered not capable, and women were not educated in the Gurukula. They were educated, they were trained in household affairs, how to be mothers and wives, and help around the house and so forth. So the boy would go to school, he would get Upanayanam, Brahma Gayatri mantra, and then he could, with that, chant other Vedic mantras, and that he would get from his guru. Otherwise, without that initiation, the mantras wouldn't work, he wouldn't be qualified, and he wouldn't be qualified to study the Vedas. All right, so we can throw that one out the door, since we go out in Sankirtan and distribute Srimad Bhagavatam to every Tom, Dick, and Harry, or whatever this is what we say in America. If you want 3 common names, I don't know if they're common now, but we say, when you want to say to everyone, you say to every Tom, Dick, and Harry. Maybe that's a little patriarchal, because we don't mention women names. To every Tom, Dick, and Sally, we have to change it and be politically correct. So, and we give the Hare Krishna mantra to everybody, so there's no qualification there. When a devotee gets second initiation, the main thing that they're getting are the called Pancharatrika mantras which are necessary if one is going to engage in deity worship. Now, Prabhupada said, we're making you Brahmins. Brahman means someone who's knowledgeable, someone who gives knowledge, someone who knows how to worship Krishna, and someone who teaches, and someone who accepts charity and gives charity. These are the qualifications of a Brahman, but specifically, qualification of a Brahman is to live in Sattva-gun, just like a bottom line basis. What are the qualities of a Brahman? Well, you can read them. They're Sattva qualities because Brahmins are in the mode of goodness. You can read them. Samvadamastaposo Chantirajavamemacha. It's in the 18th chapter. Jnanam Vijnanam Astikam Brahma Karma Swabhavajam. These are the qualities of Brahmins. Sense-controlled, honest, clean, austere, so forth. Now, at the time of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the reputation of Vaishnavism was not so great. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur was really the first Vaishnava who was confronting, or maybe the first powerful preacher who had to confront this view of Vaishnavism and had degraded from over time. People didn't think it was intellectual movement, thought it was mainly for grandmothers, basically, who like to sing and dance. Even Mahaprabhu was questioned. Why are you singing and dancing? That's not really what you do in spiritual life. So he was establishing the validity of it. But people didn't respect Vaishnavas as much as they would respect Brahmins, or they didn't see Vaishnavas as Brahmins. Vaishnavas are a higher qualification. Vaishnavas are transcendental. Brahmins are within Varnashram. But because people were not respecting Vaishnavas properly, then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, we will also give the Brahma Gayatri mantra. We will also give you the thread. This is all part of Varnashram. It's actually coming down from the transcendental to a kind of material designation, Brahman. But he said, we need to show the world that Vaishnavas are also Brahmins, actually. Better than Brahmins, but at least we need to show them that we are Brahmins. And this was not appreciated by the brahminical community, who had a monopoly on Brahmanism by caste, by birth. So this is how Prabhupada did it for us. He said first initiation and second initiation. I think Srila Bhaktisiddhanta did this also. Yeah, I know he did this. Will be separate. Or traditionally, it was just there weren't two initiations. There was one. But you were initiating people who were practicing Vaishnavism, or at least Brahminical people. So the first initiation was like, okay, get ready. Practice before you go into the ring and actually fight. You're not ready. Well, maybe it's not a good example, but it's kind of like, let's see if you can do this, Before you ski down the big mountain, just let's do the small mountain. And halfway on the small mountain, can you do that? Okay, go up a little bit. Okay, you can ski down from the top of the small mountain. Okay. I think you're ready for the big mountain now. So something like that. Give first initiation, which is just the holy name. You're vowing to chant 16 rounds, follow the principles. If you can do that, it will take you to become qualified as a Brahmin someday. That was the idea. So Prabhupada said, second initiation, we have to be strict. First initiation, more lenient. Give them a chance. Although later, he was concerned that first initiation wouldn't be taken so lightly. But at the same time, he was willing to give people a chance. Okay, let's see if you can do this. You can fit into the boots of your father, so to speak. Okay, let's see if you can run the company. Just run this office. Then run that office. Okay, it looks like you can do it. Okay, now you'll become the CEO, something like that. But it's interesting because that Brahman initiation, Brahma Gayatri, was given not because it was necessary as part of second initiation or necessary for worshiping the deities, but it was given by Bhaktisiddhanta to demonstrate to the world that Vaishnavas are also Brahmins. So now, do we need second initiation? And the answer is yes and no. Yes, it's helpful. No, it's not necessary. It's not absolutely necessary. So like, like your doctor says, take these medicines, A, B, C, D, E. Well, do I have to take D and E? He said, it'll help, but it's not necessary. But A, B, and C, you have to definitely take. So it's something like that. So A, B, and C is 16 rounds, 4 principles. The holy name will do everything. That's all you need is the holy name. But there's a problem. And the problem is we may not be chanting the holy name well, because the more purified we become, the more our lifestyle is sattvic and brahminical, the more our holy name, a chanting of our holy name becomes purified. So Prabhupada said, second initiation will help you because it purifies you more, even more, and it will help your chanting, because anything you do to purify yourself will help your chanting. So, and also you cannot worship the deity unless you're second initiated. So if you're if you come over the years, it could be a few years, it could be 50 years, if you come over the years to the brahminical platform, brahminical meaning maybe you're still a car mechanic, but your life is sattvic. You're extremely disciplined, regulated, you're knowledgeable, you worship deities, you like to worship deities. You have these sense control qualities, cleanliness, and so forth. Then yes, take second initiation. Some gurus will not give it if you're not worshiping deities. That's a personal choice. You obviously need it to worship deities. Some gurus feel that perhaps it's unnecessary. I was given second initiation after I'd been a devotee 8 months. 8 months after I moved into the temple. That was the standard. So when we talk about Brahman, think in terms of culture, and it's easier to understand. What is the culture of a Brahman? And should I, as a devotee, a Vaishnava, live the culture of a Brahman, and then make the word Brahman synonymous with sattva guna, and then I think it becomes clear. Yeah, I should live a sattvic life. I should come to that stage gradually where I live a sattvic life. And the four regulative principles are standards of sattvic life, not the only standards, but standards of it. So yeah. So let me go back to your question and make sure that I was actually answering it. Prabhupada wished all the devotees to become Brahmins when we were all below Shudra and Kali Yuga. Yeah. So now now we get to the second part of the answer, which is Prabhupada wanted to establish Varnashram. And what you're addressing with Arjuna is he shouldn't be brahminical, because he's Kshatriya. And that's his duty. The difference for us now in Kali Yuga would be your guru may say, I want you to manage something, which is, you could say, is more of a Kshatriya role. Or, well, let's just get Kshatriya. Your guru says, I want you to be in charge of temple security, although I wouldn't really say that's a Kshatriya role per se, but in a sense, you're defending, people. But most security guards are not Kshatriyas. They're just, but let's say, so, okay, well, all right, might as well just go military. Your guru says, I want you to fight in this war. And Kshatriyas can eat meat, and according to Shastra, it says any woman that approaches a Kshatriya to have a child with him, he can't deny her. And I think sometimes alcohol is allowed and so forth. So some devotee may say, maybe I should be a Kshatriya. Sounds like it's more my nature. I get the girls and I can get away with it. A few sips of wine here and there, and I'm still okay because I'm in Varnashram. So Krishna consciousness is transcendental. So our goal is not to be within Varnashram, but utilizing Varnashram can help us. But we're utilizing it, going back to the other principle, we're within a brahminical culture. So what Arjuna did was, for us, it's when we say do your duty, we always translated that in the early days of ISKCON as do what your temple president tells you to do. Do what Prabhupada tells you to do. That's your duty, that's your dharma. It's not based on, what varna you're in, and it's good to understand your varna. It's good for leaders to understand people's varna, to engage them according to their nature. But we're not relinquishing the brahminical culture, the sattvic culture. We're maybe utilizing that lower nature to purify it. So I want to be a Kshatriya, I want to, protect devotees. I'll be the security guy on Harinam, and that's my nature. But it doesn't mean that I don't chant my rounds. It doesn't mean that I can't go on the altar and do puja. But if I have to protect the devotees, then I have that nature, I will do it. So the real key here is maintaining the brahminical culture. That's extremely important. Really, really, whether you feel qualified to be a Brahmin or not, to make that commitment, the brahminical sattvic culture, we have to maintain that. That's where all the sense control comes in, the regulation, the austerity, the cleanliness, the sadhana. That's all, the brahminical sattvic culture. Although maybe it's not your nature to teach, and maybe it's not your nature to do puja. So you say, by work nature, I don't have brahminical tendencies. I'm more like a go-do person. I like to make money, or I like to build things, or I like to help devotees do things. That's fine. But by culture, you're going to be brahminical. Otherwise, how is it that Ramananda Roy is a Shudra? Well, his occupation is defined as Shudra, but his internal world is not Shudra. Not what we would consider the culture of a Shudra. So I think I think culture is the word. It's not the culture of a Kshatriya. Culture of, we're not going to say you're a Kshatriya, so, if you're propositioned by a woman, you have to do it. We wouldn't say that. We might say, you have Kshatriya tendencies, I think it would be good if you manage this project. But you still go to Mangal Artik, and you can't say, well, I'm the temple president, I don't go to Mangal Artik. Why don't you go? I'm Kshatriya. So I hope that answers your question. See, here's the problem, and it's a real challenge, or at least it can be a real challenge. We're reading, a lot of what we read in our Shastra are within a context that is different than the context we live in. And so you kind of have to take that context. It's like, okay, this plant grows in tropics, and I want to bring it to London. So how am I going to get it to work? Well, in the tropics, you just leave it outside, and you don't have to do anything. Really? Right. And then you find out later, because the temperature never gets below 20 Celsius or 70 degrees Fahrenheit, never gets above 30 Celsius. It rains almost every day. That's why you don't have to do anything. But you bring it to England, and it's really cold. You have to build a what do you call it, a greenhouse, etc. And you have to have a certain kind of soil, because the soil in England's different. And it's like. So that's what's happening. We're transporting Krishna consciousness. It's just different soil, different weather. And then, oh no, just leave it outside. It grows on its own. And so, wait a minute. I have to understand the context of who is Arjuna, what's Krishna trying to teach him, what's the culture. And if you don't understand that, and you have the tendency to be ultra fanatical, you could get really weird about our philosophy to the point of it just becomes impractical for the modern age. So you have to be a little careful. So maybe that will come up within the next question. Prabhupada says in a Gita purport that although Arjuna is a Kshatriya, he was truly a Brahman due to his thinking of Krishna always. Good point. Is that to say that when one is surrendered to Krishna or engaging in their activities as bhakti yoga, despite their occupation, they transcend their material designation? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Varnashram is social. It's social organization. That's one aspect of it, to organize society. And then it also is meant to help us as individuals. Like, what ashram should you be in? You have to decide what's best for you, or decide with the help of others. What's your best occupation? What's your nature? Where are you most inspired to serve? So if we get too technical about it, we may not see the forest for the trees. We lose perspective. a benchmark question we all should ask ourselves. Is this helping me advance in Krishna consciousness? Is this helping other people advance in Krishna consciousness? Now, sometimes when you're confused about something, and even senior devotees may be discussing something from different positions, and they're also not sure because there are different ways to look at it. One thing that can be extremely helpful is to look at the conclusion we come to, or we're thinking of coming to, by asking the question, is this going to help me? Is this going to help you? Is this going to help others become more Krishna conscious? Because if it's not, then we're getting stuck to a principle. And then we're losing the point of the principle, or maybe losing the context of the principle. In this context, that principle was that practice was applied in this particular way to achieve a particular result, for which the rules of the game now are different. It's Kali Yuga, and the result we're looking for is slightly different. So we need to ask this question. And sometimes someone may propose that we do A, and according to Shastra, A doesn't seem right, or it seems to disobey Prabhupada. But the result of A is that we all become more Krishna conscious. The Krishna consciousness movement spreads. We all become more inspired. So this is just general because we're not talking about specifics. But in many cases, we would choose that rather than go strictly exactly by the rule of Shastra, because if we do, it's not going to help anybody. It may discourage people. And so it's not producing the result, which is to become Krishna conscious and go back to Godhead. So that's an important distinction to make whenever you're making a decision. Now, I'm not saying you can make a decision like, yeah, well, if I just chant one round, I think that will help me. There's certain things that you can't change because they're in stone. It's just, that's a principle. That's how it is. But there may be other things that within a particular situation don't work, or sometimes backfire, or sometimes become destructive. There is a conversation, interesting conversation. I think only once or twice conversation like this happened. And a devotee was reading something in Prabhupada's books, or something that was published, that Prabhupada had either written or said. And he was thinking that what was written was perhaps at some point could be problematic for ISKCON, for our preaching, because it was, political correctness was not in the forefront in the 60s and 70s like it is now. But this devotee was sensitive enough to understand that what is being said, it's not really politically correct, and it could have perhaps detrimental effects on our society, even just for our society to exist peacefully within that country. If we say things like this, they might take away our religious permissions, license, and non-profit status, and even the ability to practice. Things like that was kind of the question. And he was saying, I think now it's not a problem, but I think it could be. And it was maybe a statement which was not considered, which we would be considered racist or sexist or something of that nature that would just be considered inflammatory. And he asked Prabhupada, could we take this out of the books if it's necessary? After he explained the ramifications, and Prabhupada said yes. Now, you're all saying, take that women's less intelligent out of the books. Take this out of the books. So that's, hold on. Wait a minute. Hold your horses. I'm just going to leave it at that. Don't go crazy about that one thing Prabhupada said, but one devotee was asked about this, who spent a lot of time with Prabhupada, and say, taking something out of Prabhupada's books that he said, that's like, doesn't get any worse than that. You'll be stoned for that, or hung, or worse. And he said that from his experience, he felt it's not a problem if it's inhibiting the spreading of Krishna consciousness. Interesting. That Prabhupada would be okay with it. Now, there's a big discussion, because certainly people would disagree that, it's already been said, you can't, take it away. If you take it away, then people like, why did you take it away? It was in the book last week, now it's not there. It's a complicated issue. But actually it's another issue. I'm just talking about this to keep you awake. But the real issue is, what is going to help you in your Krishna consciousness, and what is going to help the world within the context of what's acceptable as Krishna conscious practice. And what we can do and what we can't do. And what we can and can't do may be influenced to some degree by the results, the decisions we make by the results it will produce. It's a big discussion. I'm sure there are many, many opinions on both sides, because there's definitely a fear that we would drift away from what Prabhupada wanted if we just say, okay, just like, well, just, if it doesn't help people become Krishna conscious, just take it out. And you say, well, you get more people to Sunday feast if all the girls wore bikinis too, So we're not saying that. You sell more books if they had pictures of half-naked girls on the covers of our books meditating. It's probably true, right? You'd sell more to the guys anyway. And all the girls would think, oh, this book's for me. So we're not talking about that, but we're talking about a principle. At least you can apply it to yourself in your own practice, spiritual life, and in trying to preach or considering, how you should serve, and don't, if you get too caught up on a principle, especially a principle for which you don't understand the original context of why it was given and how it was applied, then you can really get off. And simultaneously, I think good advice, and I think I don't know if we had talked about this in the last class, but simultaneously, good advice is, it's just general. Is this going to work in the world? Does this work in the world? Is this how the world is? So, sometimes you'll read something in Shastra and you'll scratch your head and say, I'm trying to understand this, but it doesn't seem like this is how the world is today. And in many cases, or some cases, it's true. The world isn't that way today. What you're reading in the Shastra is the way it applied perfectly in that world. So now you have to make some adjustments. So what do I take from this, and how do I adjust it in the world today? Because it's different weather here than it is in the tropics. How am I going to plant this thing and take care of it? So it requires some intelligence, and if we don't use that, we could become a little, how should we say? I'll just say weird. Maybe that's the best word. We could become a little weird in our application of Krishna consciousness. And I think it's also important to understand that Prabhupada would also think we're weird. It's like, no, I didn't intend it to be understood in this way. We're just telling a story. You're supposed to understand the principle in this story. Well, this Brahmin cursed him and his head fell off. Well, that's not exactly what I'm training my disciples to do. or you didn't read the next purport where it said that this is the disqualification of Brahmins who aren't devotees, that they would exhibit their anger. It's like sometimes you ever seen that or have that problem? You read the purport, but the next purport has a little more explanation, and you didn't read the next purport, and you went out and killed somebody. Yeah. Okay, I'm exaggerating here, but you know what I'm saying. So I think what I'm saying, now that my brain is starting to work, I think what I'm trying to say after all that long-winded speech is use common sense. When all else fails, use common sense. Okay, now, I probably have spoken about using common sense before. And one would think, why would you have to talk about using common sense? Because that's just common sense. What I see happening everywhere from the top to the bottom is that sometimes it's hard to use common sense when you realize that you're not spiritually pure, and and you're trying to see through Shastra, and you're not actually sure that your common sense is actually Krishna conscious. And I think that's a valid consideration. That, use my common sense. Who am I? I'm just like, I'm Alachua, my common sense. So that does have validity, but if extended too far, then you won't use common sense when you should, and then you'll make bad decisions. And so it gets confusing for many devotees when they read something in Shastra, they hear something in class, and it seems like, well, this is exactly what we should do. But then trying to apply it in the world, it doesn't seem like that's going to work. Sometimes it seems like not only is it not going to work, it's going to make things worse. So then you think, okay, if this, I know sounds strange, and someone's going to want to hang me for saying this, but I'll say more than this, but I want to start with this. Sometimes we actually need to just say, okay, I want to put this Shastra right here on the table, and I just want to look at this situation and think, what would be common sense in this situation? Like, what would be, like, if I didn't have Shastra, I didn't have all these things over my head saying, this is right, this is wrong, what are people going to think? You're going to walk into the temple and, they're going to shoot arrows at you for doing this. Just think, what would be, if I didn't have that consideration, what would I do? And I know that's generally not the way we preach. We preach, see through Shastra, take guidance from Guru, and so forth. And I'm not saying not to do that, but the reason I'm saying this is that sometimes in some situations, the answer that a devotee is looking for is not actually Shastric. It's a material situation that needs a common sense answer. It's not outlined in Shastra. The Shastric principle is simply, how will this solution help you in your Krishna consciousness? That's what the Shastra is saying. That's how the Shastra is directing you. And the Shastra is directing you philosophically in so many ways. But in many situations, trying to bring the Shastra in, if a devotee is not mature, they make bad decisions where they throw out common sense, and they are trying to follow what the Shastra is. And inside, intuitively, they think, well, shouldn't it be this way? But Shastra says this, but they've misunderstood because they're not so mature. So sometimes I feel like, okay, put that aside. Let me ask you, just common sense-wise, what would you do? Okay, now we got that answer. Now bring this other consideration over and say, can you make that work with this? And just say, well, I could do this and that, and they seem to work together. In many, many cases, that's going to be the best situation. And I'm just speaking from experience of something that's really disheartening for me to see intelligent devotees make bad decisions because they're trying to follow the Shastra, but it hasn't been explained to them, Shastra, in a broad enough way that when they're trying to apply it, they're not using common sense. And then later on, when they're older devotees, they'll say things like, I was so stupid. Why was I thinking like that? Why did I make that? Was just a common sense decision. Why did I do this? Why didn't I see this? Because we're like trying to be good little Hare Krishnas, you know. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. Good little Hare Krishnas, and I didn't see like anything. So, you know, it's a balance. I'm not saying that your common sense is always the best situation. I'm not saying throughout the Shastra. I'm just saying sometimes I've had this experience where you're asking a question and the answer is not actually from Shastra. It's just common sense. Niti Shastra, you know. And then I think we had discussed that, and Jiva Goswami said that what you read in Shastra should make sense with what you see in the world. And so if you have them like, well, what I see seems completely different, maybe you're not understanding what's in the Shastra, or maybe you have to understand the Shastra based on what you see to try to get it to make sense, because sometimes we see them as two distinct things. Of course, sometimes it's transcendental. You can't see it. You can't understand it. The Shastra is describing things beyond. But when it's describing things which are more logical and relevant to life now, it should make sense. And if it doesn't make sense, I would just say, maybe that's a red flag, that I didn't understand it. Or maybe it's a red flag that I'm afraid to use common sense for whatever reason, because I think I don't have any, or it'll get me in trouble because it got me in trouble for millions of lifetimes. Or I'm afraid to listen to my intuition because I'm not in touch with the super soul, etc., etc. So it may be true that your intuition totally misguides you, your common sense totally misguides you, but my experience is that generally it doesn't misguide you. Generally, you get misguided when you don't understand Shastra. That's more of my experience. So I think that's important for you to consider. And I think all of you, would do really well when you're trying to make a decision. Just first ask yourself, okay, well, what's the common sense decision here? I'll just we'll worry about Shastra later. Well, what would make sense practically in this situation? Well, practically in this situation, this guy's a bum and I should throw him in the trash can, right? Well, what does Shastra say? The Shastra says, you have to be submissive and tolerant and chaste, and you shouldn't get divorced, and, okay. So now you have to deal with both things, the trash can or, worshiping him as God. Maybe there's a mix. But if this guy is a bum and he is abusive and he's useless and he's hopeless as a husband and a father, and everybody's telling you that, then that's like common sense. Yeah, but Shastra says, but Prabhupada says, you could get yourself into all kinds of trouble, especially if the person's abusive. So you see what I'm saying? That sometimes it's like, no, it's just obvious this isn't going to work. No, but Shastra says this and that. And that's when devotees can really get themselves in trouble. So that's all I'm saying, sometimes you just need to look at common sense first and go, okay, common sense says this, let me look at the Shastra, let me try to understand and balance it, because sometimes there's no balance with common sense. It's just Shastra and you don't even understand it, the Shastra, properly. And the Shastra is also common sense as well. Wow, that was a mouthful. Anyway, this really bothers me. I can't stop talking about it because it bothers me, because I see it all the time. And after the Mass, then the devotees just say, yeah, I should have used my common sense. I don't know why I didn't. I think part of why you didn't is because the teachers who are training you have to be more sensitive to understanding that sincere devotees sometimes tend to block out, their intuition and common sense because they feel it's like not valid anymore. And so, training needs to be a balance of both. So Jyotirmaya says, my continuing from the previous topic. So take deities at home after first initiation is a good point to go towards the second. Yeah, you can worship Gaur-Nitai before first initiation also. But yeah. You see if you're inclined to do deity worship, that's a good point in wanting to be initiated, or you're a teacher. That's brahminical. Indulekha says, I know a few devotees whose commitment and sincerity was tested after second initiation. Some of them gave up the spiritual practice. Yeah, that is a phenomena that I'm been meditating on lately in Indulekha, because I don't have many second initiated disciples, but I find this phenomenon, like disciples are writing me and everything's good, and then they get initiated, and then it's like, well, where did they go? I haven't heard from them. And like, what's up, Because something happens. I don't know. Not for all of them, but for some, something happens. Kind of like, I don't know why. Probably different for different people. But maybe it's like, well, I made it to the top, so let's just coast down. Instead of coasting down that side, they coast back down. I made it to the top, let's coast down. No, you meant coast down this side. No, you got to keep pedaling more and more to coast down that side. So, the problem also in Indulekha is that you can't, the biggest problem I see for many devotees is you're doing well now, but you don't know what Maya is going to throw at you in the next 5, 10, 15 years. So you're like, yeah, I'll just be a devotee, I want to do this. And a lot of times you have a crisis of faith, or something happens in ISKCON and it really hurts you, or a devotee mistreats you and it really hurts you. And then you become angry, upset, and one thing leads to the next. You stop chanting, you stop associating, and then... So, my hope and my message to everyone is, no matter what goes on in ISKCON, no matter who hurts you or mistreats you, your Krishna consciousness is a personal commitment between you, Prabhupada, you and your Guru, and you and Krishna. And so don't allow anything to throw you off track. It's like, what if you had a bad day at work and you came home and told your wife, I want to divorce you because I'm just like so angry. And she's like, why? What did I do? And said, you didn't do anything. It's work. Because I'm married, I have to work. And, So, we don't want to connect all these lines that in a way that sometimes can hurt you. I remember one devotee was going through this kind of crisis. And I said, wherever ISKCON is in your view of good or bad or great or really bad, the process of Krishna consciousness is eternal, and it has nothing to do with the status of ISKCON. ISKCON could go up, be the greatest thing that ever hit the universe, or it could get worse. But your relationship with Krishna and the process is eternally the same. So, and the other thing I would say to help in this situation is that the nature of the culture, materialistic culture that we live in, is not something to take lightly, because materialistic culture, it undermines faith and spirituality. And if you give in too much to it, if you associate too much with it, it can be like an acid to spiritual faith. And that's where also where people run into trouble. They lose faith, and then an aspect of that faith, which I see, and this is part of the problem, and I will just give you a recommendation based on my experience. And actually, it's interesting you brought this up because I've been thinking about this. A recommendation. If you do something and you learn to do it well, whether it's operate a machine, software, whether it's a sport, an instrument, an exercise, if you do it well, you benefit from it. or a diet or a vitamin regimen or something. If you do it well, you benefit from it tremendously. If you don't do it well, then you're the one with all the bad reviews. It didn't work like it, Well, it's because you didn't put it together right. You didn't tighten this thing. Yeah, I got it, and this fell off. Yeah, because you didn't tighten it when you put it together. That's why it fell off. It wasn't the fault of the product. This company's bad, and everything they make is bad because every time you bought from them, you didn't put it together correctly. So what I see is happening for many, many devotees is they're taking to Krishna consciousness because philosophically it makes sense. They're taking to Krishna consciousness because the material world does not make sense. But they're not applying it well. They're not tightening the screws, and it's not working so well. So their material life isn't working well. So they're taking to Krishna consciousness. But now their spiritual life, which is supposed to replace the material life, to give them the happiness and satisfaction and social interaction and all that they need, if it's not done well, then they're left with a problem. And they start thinking, well, better off materially. A corollary to that problem is they're better off materially now that they've been devotees. Whereas before they were devotees, they were, really pounding the pavement, so to speak, running into walls and suffering. And they've elevated themselves as a devotee, and so they're not suffering so much. But they're not merged in Krishna consciousness deeply enough. And they think, well, I can just go back materially and I can be happier now because I'm smarter. And they do that. And they think, well, actually, I'm feeling better. I used to feel so guilty as a devotee because I couldn't finish my rounds or I chanted them improperly and this and that. I understand that, yeah. But that's part of the problem, that if you chanted your rounds and you did it well, number one, you wouldn't feel guilty. Number two, you would feel very satisfied and blissful. So to make it in the long run in Krishna consciousness, you have to be a bit strategic. And also it's like fighting a war. You have to be strategic about what's going to come. And this culture is going to throw on all kinds of stuff on you. And it could make Krishna consciousness look like, this is like just an old and antiquated religion that doesn't relate. And, devotees aren't the greatest people, etc., etc. I put out a video. I don't know if you've seen it. It's called Reformatting Your Mind. And if you haven't seen it, that means it's probably not out yet. I don't want to say I put it out. I recorded it. I don't know. From the time I recorded, I don't know when it goes up. I don't know where they are. But it was based on a realization that I had. And I may have explained this to you, but I think it's extremely important and a great way to end this class. And you'll see the video also at some point. I think it was called Reformatting the Mind. And I may have explained this already, but I think it's definitely worth explaining again. And reformatting the mind is something that I noticed that I do a lot. And I never noticed. I kind of was conscious of it, but more unconscious of it. Kind of, say I had programmed myself to reformat my mind. And by reformatting my mind, what I was doing was, in every situation that I was dealing with, I was reformatting my mind in the sense of looking at this situation in a way in which it would be easiest for me to be successful. And sometimes you'll do this in sports. You'll have to, you're going into a match and you'll need to psych yourself up. Like boxers will go, yeah, I'm going to kill this guy. He can't stand, he's a good fighter, but nobody can stand up to me. And you're psyched to go in. And I read a story about a fighter who got psyched out for some reason. He thought some voodoo or something was being done on him, and he couldn't fight. He was a great fighter, and he lost, and he shouldn't have, because he thought there were some spirits working against him. Maybe he was African and believed in that. Because it's common. There is, voodoo is voodoo, believe me. And, he probably has seen it in his life. So I think we understand this. Like when you want to achieve something, you kind of have to, talk to yourself and go, okay, think like this, do it like this, whatever it may be, right? You're going in for an interview, go in confident, walk confident, sit like this. You're good. Just remind yourself you're good. You can impress them. So what I realized that what I was doing was that I was looking at life like a highway and weather changing. And so, weather's always changing in life, isn't it? All of a sudden it's a storm and you could kind of change your driving tactics. Sometimes it's really bad. You just stop and wait for the storm to go by. Or whatever, the road's bumpy or it's narrow. So you're changing, and you're kind of getting in the mood. And I realized this life was changing. I was going, everything was fine, and then change up, something happened. And like, wow, this is really difficult. And it's starting to negatively impact me. And then at that point, I do mind or whatever we want to brand it. Maybe we can create a course called Mind Reformatting. Reformat your hard drive, the hard drive of your mind. And I realized I was always reformatting my mind to be able to deal with a situation, because I could see if I didn't reformat it, the situation was like pushing me down. It was like, what's the use of doing this? This is hard. I'm never going to be successful. Whatever negative was there. So I'd reformat my mind to think, okay, we can do it this way, that way, this way. I'll call this. I'll get this information. I've done this before. I can do this. And then all of a sudden, okay, I can handle this. So I think this is extremely important, because ISKCON is going to change throughout your life. The world's going to change throughout your life. It's not just going to be this steady road, same weather, same wind, same surface. It's going to be changing. And a lot of devotees, when they hit the pothole and they don't swerve around it, and then they get knocked off the road. So I think this is like a huge problem. It's common. Devotees get knocked off the road. And then when they get knocked off, or better, before they get knocked off, while they're getting knocked off, they're not reformatting to be able to adjust. Like when I first went to Mauritius, there were potholes everywhere. And I never drove on a road with potholes, so I just drive into them. And the devotee sitting next to me, he said, you guys, all you foreign devotees are so funny. You don't drive around the potholes, you just drive through them, into them. And then when he said that, I was like, yeah, we don't have potholes. We're not used to driving like that. So it's something like that, reformatting. Oh, I'm going to have to drive around potholes now because this is the way the road is. And a lot of us just drive into the potholes and destroy our car. So there's more to say about it, because you're saying, well, how do you reformat your mind? And what I personally do is I just try to get my mind, try to look at the situation in a way that I can best go forward. Like, what's the attitude? How should I see it? What's the verse? What did Prabhupada say about this? What consciousness should I have? And then once I do that, then I can go through it and I'm steady. No matter ISKCON goes up or down, my best friend leaves me, devotee turns against me, whatever, I'm just reformatting so I can continue. So that, I think, is super important and necessary for us. And I hope that made sense. Maybe we'll have to do a whole workshop, mind reformatting. So Indulika says, what? Looks like second initiation is something really serious. Yeah, it is, definitely. And there also could be reactions to not following vows that are serious, like that. Initiation, especially second initiation, it's serious. And there are reactions if you don't follow. So, and you may get second initiation and not live a brahminical life, and it's not really doing anything for you. It's just the mantras aren't working because you need the sattvic lifestyle for the mantras to work. To what point can we adjust things, not water down KC? It seems to be a difficult task. Yeah, it is a difficult task, but it is the task. I have this little thing going on in my head. Maybe I've told you before. I want to tell you what it is, but first I want to tell you something I read yesterday, which is very interesting, which relates to this. And I read something, we're having a discussion about racism. And so I read something. It says it's not that you're racist or not a racist. You're either a racist or you're anti-racist. And what the person meant is, you're either not a racist. What do you say? You're either a racist or you're anti-racist. Anti-racist means you do nothing about racism. You're not a racist. You don't like it, but you don't do anything about it. So so I had this experiment. We could call it a thought experiment. I go back to Godhead, and Prabhupada's going to ask me questions, and I think, well, what questions is he going to ask me? And Prabhupada could say something, this was going on, why didn't you stop it? Well, Prabhupada, I didn't do anything to promote it. Yeah, I know, but why didn't you stop it? So I'm not a racist, yeah, but you're not anti-racist because you're not doing anything to improve the situation. So sometimes when I ask this question to myself, if I'm going to make a decision, and I have to tell Prabhupada, this is the decision, is he going to say, why did you make that decision? Or sometimes the decision you make is not making a decision. And is he going to say, why did you allow that to go on? So that's a thought process that you can go through. You're going to talk to Prabhupada. You don't want to do something because you think it's not Krishna conscious. Or you want to do something because you think it's the best thing for Krishna consciousness. All right. So you're going to meet Prabhupada and you have to tell him you did it. What's he going to say? Is he going to say you shouldn't have done it? Or is he going to say, why didn't you do it? Another thing that I do, which I think is necessary if you're experimenting, if you're playing with something which you're not sure is going to be the best thing or even allowable sedantically, but you're not convinced on one side or the other. If you do it, just be very careful to see the results of it. Is this actually helping? Are you becoming Krishna conscious? Are the devotees becoming Krishna conscious? Are the people you're preaching to becoming Krishna conscious? And if the answer to any of those is no, probably that means it shouldn't be done. Or not probably, it shouldn't be. If the answer is yes, 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 we're furthering without compromising the principles, we're just doing it in a different way. And these are sometimes difficult discussions because some of the things you may want to do were never done by Prabhupada, and in one sense, at least philosophically, he spoke against them. Like Prabhupada always spoke against Hatha Yoga. What's Hatha Yoga going to give you, And then sometimes devotees teach Hatha Yoga. What's going on here? Prabhupada spoke against Hatha Yoga, you're teaching Hatha Yoga. Well, in this country, we can't have a temple, so it's the only way we can get people to come for kirtan, or we get more people. It's like you can have your reasoning, but ultimately, you have to look at what did it produce? Are these people becoming devotees? Are they practicing Krishna consciousness properly? Was yoga a good way to get them? And you say, yeah, we don't just do yoga. There's philosophy. There's kirtan. Yoga was just a way to get them. Okay, there are pros and cons to both sides of the argument. But really, then the question I would ask you, is that the only way you could have got them? You had to do the yoga to get them? You couldn't have got them some other way? And the answer was absolutely no. We tried, nobody came till we did yoga, and then from the yoga. I know in one place, they made so many devotees through their yoga class, because from the yoga class, they went into the Bhagavad Gita class, and from the Bhagavad Gita class, they became devotees. And if we just went straight to Bhagavad Gita, nobody would come. So, and you say, okay, it seems like it works. It seems like I could tell Prabhupada, this is why we did it, and this is what was happening before, and nobody was coming. And they're all devotees chanting 16 rounds, 4 principles. So that's the way I would look at it, personally. And Jackson, I'm keeping Jackson up late at night. In my mind, I imagine the peak of the golden age being a full resurgence and application of Varnashram Dharma in the modern day. Could it manifest differently due to circumstances and political climate? It has to manifest differently. Because everything we learn about Varnashram in Shastra is from a different age. And Varnashram is going to look different in this age. And it's going to look different in how we implement it first within ISKCON. And, just the talk about implementing Varnashram in society, that's like, to me, it's such a strange discussion because what influence do we have in society? The only influence we have now is within our movement, within our organization. So, Prabhupada's talking about Varnashram implementation in his books, societal level. And so, we're not in that position. When will we be in that position? I have no idea. Will we be in that position ever? I have no idea. Maybe yes, maybe no. That depends on so many factors. So, establishment of Varnashram, for me, stage one is be in the right Varna and be in the right ashram. Now you're doing Varnashram. Wow, that was easy. That's step one. Nadi says, like Prabhupada says that we should be independently thoughtful. Yeah, exactly. But don't be independently stupid. The point is that every value is being manipulated and people are discussing even the obvious, trying to prove the opposite is good. Because of social media, you have to hear so many things, both good and bad. And we get influenced. Also says in Krishna consciousness, 90% common sense. Yeah. And he also said, if you don't have common sense, ask someone who does. Is there anything we can do to make sure we are more aware of our intuition? I think the reason, one of them at least, that I'm seeing, the reason we don't listen to intuition is because we put so much importance on hearing from higher authority as our intelligence, Shastra as our intelligence, which we should, of course. And that sometimes intuition comes and then we think, but I'm just a young devotee, and what do I know? And so we just turn it off, thinking, I just have to follow the Shastra and this and that. But intuition often is Krishna speaking. So if we understand that intuition may be Krishna speaking, at least give it a listen, think, consider. And it's kind of like common sense. Okay, just let's put that intuition in a little box by itself without anything else and start thinking, does this make sense? Would this work? What would happen? And then all the buts are in the other box. But Shastra says, Guru Maharaj says this and that. A lot of times I will tell a devotee something to do. But I actually don't know as many details about them and their situation as they do. So sometimes I'll give a general instruction, and then they will come back and say, but in this situation, A, B, and C. And I'll go, okay, that makes sense, then do that. So I think we have to take instructions that way, that you're given an instruction, but then you have to analyze it according to your situation and who you are and what you can and can't do. So your Guru Maharaj says, surrender to Krishna fully. You're like, okay, that's the philosophy. And then you're in a situation, he asks you to do a service which you'll not be able to do well because it's too austere or too difficult or whatever. And you just explain it to him. He said, I could do some of it, but I can't do all of it. It's beyond my capacity. So, and I say, I have this strong intuition that if I do that, it'll just be detrimental. I'll crash. So it doesn't mean you don't understand the philosophy. It just means your intuition is calibrating what you can do. So I think once you're no longer afraid of your intuition, then you can deal with it. Right? So I would say maybe the quickest answer for that is, I think a lot of us are afraid of our intuition. because we're afraid it would go against Shastra. But I don't always see intuition as something different than Shastra. It's just like an add-on. It's not in opposition to it. It's a clarification. Okay, my intuition, like, what is your intuition in terms of Varna? What is your intuition in terms of ashram? What is your intuition in terms of how much you can surrender right now? What would be healthy? What would be unhealthy? So Shastra says completely surrender. Your intuition says you're not ready for complete. You're ready. You could surrender A, B, and C, but the rest of the alphabet's going to take time. And if you go for the rest of the alphabet, you'll probably leave Krishna consciousness. So your intuition, if you're not afraid to hear it and you realize that it's giving you that kind of guidance, then it's easier to hear. Now, you might say, does that mean all my intuition is going to be correct? No, because your intuition is also based on knowledge and experience and maturity. But my experience is most of the time it will be correct. And as you mature, it'll be correct more often. And as I said before, if it's not correct, you'll find out. And just, if you're not sure and say, this is my intuition, I'll go with it. And just be very open to the fact that you could be entirely wrong. Be open to the fact you could be entirely right and just see, instead of diving in the deep water, just get a little wet and see, well, is this a good idea? My intuition is I need a break. I just need to go to the beach in some warm country and just walk on the beach and like chant all day and read and just go swimming. That's my intuition. Well, what verse is that? That sounds like Maya. You have service. Now I just have this intuition. I'm going to burn out. All right. So, all right, you go for a day. I did that so much. That was like so helpful. I'm so burned out. I haven't been studying much. So then or you go there the first day and you go, this is crazy. I just need to regulate my life and, be reading every day, and I don't need to just come off. This is a cop-out. And then you go, okay, I was wrong. In either case, you clarified it. So that's a few words on intuition. Krishna Karshini says, oh my God, am I going to be able to take breakfast before lunchtime? Okay. Krishna Karshini says, it seems we as a movement are weird. Write that to the GBC. Because we keep making non-devotees believe that to be a devotee of Krishna, they have to look Hindu, wearing shari, dhoti. Most of people don't want to look weird and change dress and to ethnic Indian. We are losing so many people. We are losing. Devotee of Krishna means Indian clothes, shika, shaved head. Does mean for brahmachari, shika, shaved head, and tilak. I think we have to finally resolve the dress issue in ISKCON. Well, you want to know my 2 cents? In fact, I just read something today, Krishna Karshana. I was even thinking of sending you. I don't know if I can find it. It was about Prabhupada saying, you should be wearing tilak, and Prabhupada liked to see his women in shadi. I said, you look very beautiful in shadi. I can't find that quote. But this is what I would say. This is one thing I would say. What you brought up in this discussion of clothes we wear in public, clothes we wear at home. What we do in public, what we do at home, right? So, do I wear tilak at home? Yeah, I do. You can see it. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it? Tilak is like transcendental makeup. Tilak is like Krishna protecting your body, and all chanting all these mantras. Like I like to chant mantras. Om Narayanaya Namah. Om Govindaya Namah. Om Madhavaya Namah, Govindaya Namah, Vishnudeya Namah, Vamanaya Namah, Shiraya Namah, His Grace Mahatma Prabhu Namah, Murushanaya Namah, Vikramaya Namah, Om Keshavaya Namah, Om. Yeah, it's cool. I like doing that. So I am putting on tilak every day. Kanti mala you must be wearing. You're initiated. You're a devotee. Wear you kanti mala. You must be wearing. I'm a good devotee. So, if you're doing your puja at home, you should be wearing clean clothes, whether dhoti sari, whether clean cotton or silk, tilak, neck beads, like that. You should be wearing that. I was just talking to my daughter yesterday. I said, is it chadar? Chadar. Chadar. Chadar is called sadhuvesh. Did you know that? Sadhuvesh, the clothes of a sadhu. Sadhus wear chadars. And I said, don't you kind of feel like a sadhu when you wear a chadar? She goes, yeah, definitely. So, we were yesterday at the pharmacy waiting for something, and we were chanting our rounds while we were waiting. And this Indian man comes, Hare Krishna, because he could see we were chanting, So, your personal preference at home or your travel attire, how you want to fly around the world and like that, and what you want to do to go shopping, you want to put your baseball hat on so people don't see your sika when you go shopping because you're afraid everyone that sees you is going to faint or look at you like you're Frankenstein. That's your personal choice. But when there's no reason not to wear tilak, and definitely you have to wear neck beads and no reason not to do something ritualistic that is beneficial, and you don't do it, it has nothing to do with the public because the public doesn't see you. Now, when you go out in the public, you have to make your decisions based on preaching. And definitely, some people are going to look at us and think, you guys are weird. And some people are going to look at us and think, you guys are cool, which is all the weird people think we're cool, right? So then we get all the weird people in the temple, right? Now, I'm exaggerating to some degree. So there's much to be said about it, and it's going to have to be a decision that's made individually. But I think if you're pushing people to be Indian, that doesn't make sense. If you're pushing people to be Krishna conscious, that makes sense. And if there's anything Indian that helps them be Krishna conscious, that makes sense to do it. Right? And if it doesn't help their Krishna conscious, they're not necessary, then that's for them to decide that. Like, a lot of women will come and they say, I like sari, I want to wear sari. I like that. They like Indian. I think the Krishna West perspective is that's true. A lot of people do like Indian. But there's a lot more that don't. Do I have to become Indian to be Krishna conscious? No, you don't. So yeah, it's actually a preaching discussion. Madhavananda Das. SNS, Sachinandan Swami, My experience, why devotees are leaving the process, etc., is more. But the offender had practically no purpose, intention to hurt or offend, makes actually the victim even more an offender. And with the feeling of being hurt that blocks everything and the rest follows soon. Yeah, I agree. Very common experience. And another devotee is mistreated and they just... It depends, we're all different. And there's a lot of feeling of victimization. Madhavananda, I think someday soon. Well, I deal with this in my forgiveness course, but I can't get all of ISKCON to take it. But if they did, this would prevent a lot of this problem. But I think we really need a course in victimization, in dealing with that. definitely. Because, how to deal with just being offended because it happens. And also how not to stigmatize ISKCON for the behavior of a few people. Because that's unfortunate. Ultimately, anything which takes us away from Krishna is unfortunate, especially if we're actually causing it to happen, but blaming someone else, thinking they're making it happen. But ultimately, we're making it happen. Although, I was thinking, Madhavananda, I was thinking yesterday, I wanted to give a class on leadership. And I would tell the leaders, Prabhupada said, if somebody leaves, it's 50% our fault and 50% their fault. And my request to your leaders is, how can you make it? We have to have an ISKCON where if someone leaves, it's 100% the fault of the person and 0% the fault of ISKCON. We do not want to give people a reason to leave. Especially as a leader, you don't want to do anything that gives reason for people to leave ISKCON. So that's your point is well taken. At the same time, let's not give fodder to those sensitive people who will feel victimized when they're mistreated, so that they're well taken care of. Now, someone might say, well, mistreatment, it's just Krishna's teaching somebody. Yeah, that's there, but we shouldn't take it on, Prabhu, I'm going to mistreat you today because, you need to learn a lesson. So get over there. I got the whip. Bend over. No, that's not the process. Nadia says, it seems to me that intuition is described in the Bhagavad Gita 10:10. To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. Is that right? Yeah, that's part of intuition. Prabhupada says that intuition is super soul. Yeah, but question is, how do I know I'm hearing super soul? How do I know I'm not just hearing my mind? Sometimes you won't know until you do it. How do I know when I jump off the diving board, the water's going to be deep enough? Well, you'll find out after you do it, and there's no way to know until you do it. Well, the other people jumped off. They made it. Okay, looks okay. Well, that guy jumped off, and he's dead. Probably I don't want to do it. But if you can't make those distinctions before, you'll make them after, and hopefully they won't be so extreme. Achyutananda says, Haribol for the forgiveness course. And if you haven't taken maybe you haven't taken it, because if you haven't, go to my website and you can take it. It's an extra motivation to wear dhoti tilak because Srila Prabhupada likes it. Yeah. One thing, Krishna Karshani, it's harder to fall in Maya when you go out in public in a sari or a dhoti, because, people will if you mess up, they'll know that's a Hare Krishna messing up. And if you're a guy, the girls are looking at you going, oh, he's a monk. So he was okay, forget him. Or maybe nowadays it's he's a monk, so let's go for him. I like monks. I don't know, I always felt in a dhoti, I always felt like one of two things. Either people think I'm weird and they don't want to talk to me, which sometimes when I'm on an airplane, I please don't talk to me. This is the only 8 hours where nobody can contact me. I just want to read. Or sometimes they'll actually talk to you about Krishna. So, and see, the thing is that I think it's so important, and when we have these kinds of discussions of, dhoti no dhoti, is that's, it's not up to me to tell people dhoti no dhoti. It's really a decision you're going to have to make. So, Nadia, we have a new site, bhaktisupport.org, where the courses have gone now. Well, I'm not sure they've gone all there yet. Why don't you go there, this is for Nadia, bhaktisupport.org. Go there and see if you can get the class there. And then if that's the case, you can start sending people there. just read the story about Sureshwar Prabhu about tilak. Before the lecture initiation, Prabhupada sent Shilavati's son Girish and Virabhadra out of the room because they didn't have tilak on. The boys were living in New Vrindavan and were 8 and 10 years old. Even though they were just boys, Prabhupada motioned them out of the room, saying, "Go put on tilak." While they were out of the room, anointing their bodies with tilak, Prabhupada started talking about tilak and how it was our trademark. Prabhupada said, "We are selling Krishna for free and still no one will take." And he started laughing. Then Prabhupada started giving an intricate lecture on, or maybe I was tired, but I couldn't follow what he was talking about. When I finally started to catch on, Bhagavan Das's baby son interrupted the lecture by clanging kartals. When the child did that, Prabhupada expertly used it in his lecture. He said, "Just like this child, he has practice." Prabhupada, in talking about transmigration of the soul, Prabhupada said, he has practice. He started beaming at this little boy, and the boy started beaming at Prabhupada. We were looking at the boy, looking at Prabhupada. There was a dramatic pause, as if there was something going on between Prabhupada and the little boy. Okay. This Sunday was Guru Maharaj Vyasa Puja online, and we were all wearing tilak. So at the break, I had to go to the supermarket, and people were looking at me. Then I realized I had my tilak on. Well, what to do? I just moved on. When they look at you, just go, yeah, this means that the body is a temple of God. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Can't read Madhavananda. I can't read what you said. I mean, if I read it like you said it, looks German to me. If Prabhupada would know that Sarya Dodi is the reason people don't come, he would not like it, yeah. It's true. You know, things can change. But what you have to understand, like that story from Sureshwar, you have to understand, it's like during Prabhupada's time, we were very much merged in this culture. And so, you know, the only reason not to wear something devotional was to spread, you know, distribute more books, or in some other rare cases. So every preacher will decide, and every individual will decide what works for them. But, you know, tilak, yeah, and it's like Toshan said, if you know something's going to please your guru, you do it, right? So, like if Prabhupada came, I would not show up in jeans and a t-shirt. I don't think he'd like that. Personally, I would show up in dhoti kurta, because if that's what he likes, then I do it. If he doesn't, then I don't do it. If he wants me to wear a wig and suit, then I do that, and a tie. I've done it before, not the wig. Well, I wore wigs as a young devotee. I've worn the tie and the suit sometimes. I hate it, but... You want me to wear a suit tomorrow for class? What do you think? That'd be interesting. Okay, I'm going to go take breakfast. You got a half-hour bonus. I don't know. I'm just so merciful. I just can't get over it, right? I gave you a half hour at no extra cost. Okay, everyone. Bhakti support site. I hope it works. We're going to discontinue the teachable site soon, and it will be Bhakti support. We're designing a new logo. Okay, everyone. It's nice discussion. And share this video. There's some points on here. If we have any one of you out there that has time, that edits video, there's like that little segment. There's a couple little segments, like in every class, that when I'm talking about them, I think, you know, this is really important. More people should hear this. And those kinds of things edited and just put up would be really good. Most super best forgiveness seminar from you and from anybody. For anybody ever. Oh, thank you. I'm flattered. Okay, so if you know how to edit videos and you have lots of time, then just let me know, and we'll give you lifetime's worth of engagement. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Go Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol.